the last live show that we do on Facebook. We'll still announce them on Facebook starting next week, but yeah, we're making that transition. So visit our YouTube channel. We'll put a link in the show notes. But it's I think it's youtube.com/X-Oriente. And subscribe, hit the subscribe button, and then hit the bell so that you're notified when we have new episodes. And that will be that. So we were talking about what we wanted to talk about, and let's see here. And Jason, you've been watching some interesting TV lately.
Right. So I was talking to you about, we were just sort of talking right away about what we're watching, because we're both usually interested in about the same thing. And I was telling you, listen, I was watching this show called The Vow on HBO. And it's a very long documentary. It's a serialized documentary. So there's 9 1 hour long episodes, I believe, maybe 8. But it is a deep dive into a company called Nexium, spelled capital NXIVM. And they were accused of being a cult. And this is, you probably saw it in the news a few months ago, where they arrested a whole bunch of people. And there was a sex slavering. There's my wife running in the background. That's okay. So it was a big scandal. At any rate, it turns out, and I didn't know much about them, but through this documentary, they talk about the fact that they're a MLM, or a multi-level marketing company, which, if you don't know about them, things like, what's the big famous one, Eric?
There's several. There's Amway.
No, I'm really
level marketing.
Amway. That's the one. That's the one I'm thinking of, right? But I mean, really, anything structured like Amway is an MLM, and there are just innumerable numbers of MLMs. And if someone is trying to sell you something on Facebook, chances are they're operating under an MLM model. At any rate,
I think Herbalife is one. So the idea of an MLM, just for anybody who's not familiar, so an MLM, the idea is that you're not only selling product, right, but you're also trying to recruit people into like some kind of organization, and you get a cut of their product, of their sales, and you kick your proceeds upstairs to somebody. And it's I mean, the problem is that there's a very, very fine line between MLM and Ponzi scheme.
It's shaped like this. I can't think of. Oh yeah, it's a pyramid, right? So,
Illuminati.
The important thing is that an MLM, most traditional MLMs sell products, right? Beauty products, that kind of stuff with really, really low overhead and a lot of margin. And that lot of margin is put there so that you can move that up your ladder or what have you. At any rate, that's not what Nexium did. Nexium was very next level. What they were selling was self-help. And what I thought was really interesting about it is in its first couple episodes where they introduce what Nexium is and the people involved in it and how they got involved in it, is that a lot of the stuff that they were talking about sounded like masonry. And it kind of went, oh, wow. Huh? And I started to really kind of measure the two things and to say, like, well, I mean, obviously we're not a cult, but wow. Like these things, like they're talking about, the things that they do, kind of feel Masonic, you know? They would signify your rank in the organization by wearing colored sashes, satin sashes, regalia, if you will. And the way that they spoke was vaguely Masonic, right? They used the terms that they used were all about self-improvement and empowerment and enlightenment, right? And so all these things, these are key words that were kind of firing synapses in my head. And I was like, oh man, this is messed up. And and it really got me to thinking about, like, well, you know, we've been called a cult before. what's the difference between us and Nexium, right? And and then that started a conversation between you and I that we said, oh no, we should really put this on the air.
That's right.
Because we're not a cult, but how do you know?
This is the curse of the podcaster. When you have a conversation that's so good, you're like, wait, we have to stop talking about it because this is good radio, right?
Right, absolutely. And so so that's kind of where we are, right? Is that Nexium is a crazy cult. Freemasonry isn't, but boy, some of the things that Nexium was selling reminded me of Freemasonry. And I think that the key takeaway for me, and we'll talk maybe more about this later, but my key takeaway from this whole thing was it shocked me how easy it is to manipulate people who just want to do good, who honestly just want to be better people. Whatever that means, they honestly want to be better. Well, it turns out that if you want to be better, it's really easy for evil people to hijack that process of you being a better person. And it's especially easy for people who are kind of seeking something, right? They want some belonging as well. They're looking for some answers. And when you're looking for answers and you want to be a better person and you're seeking that, you're prime bait for people who want to do bad things. And so I figured, boy, let's talk about that.
Yeah,
because it really merits a discussion.
Mm-hmm. So interestingly, I've had my run in with these types of organizations. So
yeah,
a lot of these things kind of grew out of what was called EST, which is something that a guy named Werner Erhard put together back in the late 1960s. And so the idea behind it was kind of like assertiveness training, right? It was helping people become their own self-advocate. And there were a bunch of different variations of this. The one that I got mixed up in, this is many years ago, back in the 80s, was one called, it was called The Mastery. It was created by, and it was designed for actors, right? But at the time I'd been living with a bunch of actors. I'd been hanging out with a bunch of actors. And even though I didn't really consider myself an actor, I was sort of a young designer. I was considered myself creative, and I thought there might be some lessons there. And someone had kind of turned me onto it, and it was originally created by Ted Danson and a guy by the Ted Danson and a guy by the name of David Darlow. And I don't know if there were other people involved. I didn't really know very much about it, but basically, I remember going there, and it was very expensive. I think it was like $500. That to a person making, I was making $10,000 a year. So that was a lot of money. That was like a month's, month's pay almost.
Yeah.
Right. So that was a lot of money to me. And so, in the way that the language that they used was like, well, you need to commit to yourself. If you're not committed to yourself, who's going to be committed to you? Yeah. Right.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I did this. It was a 2-day seminar, and I found it really helpful. I found it really useful. There were certain things that, I was having creative blocks, and it helped remove some of those. And there were some useful techniques and stuff like that. Where it started to go wrong for me was afterward, right? This is, well, now that you just took the first step, now you got to take the advanced course, right? And the advanced course is $1,500, and I'm like, that ain't going to happen. Oh, but you have to be committed, right? It's like you will, the universe will help you find a way. And then they offer to lend me the money to do it, and I'm just like, no. And they really put a strong sell, like, well, you must not really be committed to creative excellence then, right? And it was just sort of like, what the hell, and so the whole thing kind of left me with a bad taste in my mouth. I just, I kind of drifted away with it. And then, years later, I was working at a tech startup. And one of the guys who was like one of the head executives, start talking about this thing called Landmark Forum. I don't know if you ever heard of anybody. Have you ever run into anybody who's like, oh, Landmark Forum, you got to do Landmark Forum. So Landmark Forum Same thing, right? It's very similar to Est. It's very similar to the Mastery. They have this
Mm-hmm.
kind of proprietary tech. They have their own language. It's a self improvement system. And again, and so what they do is, like, once you've taken the landmark course, whatever the
Intro course,
introductory
right?
course is,
Uh-huh.
they really put the hard press on you to bring more people in. And
There you
so
go.
this guy was like, I will, I'll, I'll pay for your tuition, like he was just trying, he wanted all of his executives,
Mm-hmm.
to be part of this landmark forum thing. We're going to go on a retreat. It's going to be great. And I was just like, done it. I've done it already. Like, trust me, I've done this already. And I was able to get out of it. But a lot of the people that were working for it wasn't. And so a lot of
Right.
these things, I think Nexium, I remember reading about it, and I just thought, oh yeah, it's like another landmark forum, or another Mastery, or another
Sure.
Est, or another,
Right. Right.
take your pick.
Yeah. And it's kind of built that way, right? I mean, it's built off of those things. I was just looking up. I'm trying to find. There's actually something that is it's built actually on a which I find fascinating, is sham psychology. I love sham psychology. And Nexium has a lot to do, and there's a certain one, and I can't remember what it's called, something neural.
Oh, neuro-linguistic programming.
That's it. There it is. Neuro-linguistic programming, which is just such a truckload of shit. And they took a lot of neuro-linguistic programming and turned it into this. And it turns out that it's such an incredibly good scam that neuro-linguistic programming is used by people like Scientology and a bunch of other pretty successful programs to take your money. And so,
yeah, I mean, a lot of it is junk science, but behind it are some things that, that
sure.
we have in Masonry, frankly. And there, and it's,
that's exactly what I'm saying.
And it's interesting. So there's a group of, Scientologists, right,
Mm-hmm.
that have split off from, like, the main, there's a sort of like the Protestants of Scientology, and they refer
such a
to,
weird thought.
like, there's the tech of Scientology, which they feel is valid, and then there's the organization of Scientology that they feel is invalid, and so they use the tech without, the rest of the organization, and of course there's religious wars and everything like that. But a lot of these things are present really in any sort of philosophical self-improvement type system.
Yeah, and they're also very broad. They're very broad assumptions that are, while not easily provable, they're at least anecdotal easily. And so, it feels right. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's a good way to term this stuff. And so I understand kind of how this stuff happens, but to me, as an MLM, this is really interesting because they're not selling anything. They don't have a product. All they have are good feelings. All they have literally is what they call their tech. This is their technology. And it was developed by one guy. And that part of the story, to be honest, is unimportant to us. It's wildly entertaining television, and I can't highly recommend it enough. And it's great documentary filmmaking. Yeah. But for our concerns, it kind of stops there. And where we go back is, all right, so how do we know we're not a cult? And we had this conversation, like, how do we know? You know? And you've done marketing work on how brands almost become quasi-religious, right?
Yeah. So actually,
right. And that's kind of close to cults, right?
I don't know if I did a show. I think I might have done this show for
we've talked about
Patreon
this.
supporters, for our
Sure.
executive producers, but sure. I did a presentation a couple of years ago at the Scottish Rite at your invitation, Jason, called Masonry as a Religion. And it was sort of my attempt to play the Loki role of Rex Hutchins and, be like the Masonic trickster. And really what I did was I just sort of, like, pointed out all the similarities of how Masonry and religion have a lot in common sociologically, but how we differed in such fundamental ways that you really can't call Masonry a religion.
Right.
And so I think, the first thing too is that when we hear the word cult, except for cult movie, cult following, and Blue Oyster Cult, right? It tends to be
and that one maybe not.
Yeah, and it tends to be. I love Blue Oyster Cult. It tends to be a negative term, right? It tends to be like a derisive term. And I've actually read some writers, some sociological writers refer to cults as, they define a cult as a cult is the religion you don't like, right? Which is,
pretty great.
I get it. That. Okay.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I'll take that.
But there's a group of people called the International Cultic Studies Association, which is a great name.
It really is.
Because if you can work the word cultic into your name,
10 points.
Yeah, 10 points. But they have a very good set of resources. And here's the problem with cults. So if you're a serious scholar, if you're like a sociologist or an anthropologist or something like that, and you study religion, cult is such a loaded word that it kind of introduces some bias and some prejudice into the work. So most sociologists don't even like to use that word anymore. What they like to use is the word new religious movements. They call it NRMs, right? Which is it's jargony, but it's a little bit more accurate and a little bit more neutral, I think, than cult. But they define a cult.
Feels a little euphemistic, but whatever.
Yeah. Well, but here's the thing. It is, I've done a lot of research as to why that is and how that happens, and it's a super interesting story.
Right.
But to define a cult, they have a pretty good definition, I think. A cult is an ideological organization held together by charismatic relationships and demanding high levels of commitment.
Yeah.
So the thing is there's three parts to this, right? So part A is it's got to be an ideological organization.
Yeah.
Right? They have a clear point of view on the world.
Right.
Right.
There's a right and there's a wrong.
Exactly. There's
and
a
both
right
and both are clearly defined by the organization, right?
Yeah.
That's what an ideology is.
Yep. And so there's so that's A. B is it's held together by charismatic relationships.
Sure.
Right. So
I would agree with that. I would add to that maybe that it has a personality-based leader, but that would be my only edit to that one. Right. Because the charismatic relationships, I mean, I get that. Yes. But I think it's too broad for my definition of a cult. I think cult always has some sort of charismatic leader, but it's a personality based charismatic leader. Right. Because without the leader, the organization, the ideology falls apart. It needs to be driven by one person. You know what I'm saying? I mean, what cults are driven by just ideals?
There's several. I mean, again, divorcing ourselves from the word cult and talking about new religious movements. I mean, you could look at things like Wicca.
Okay. All right. Okay.
There's no charismatic leader of Wicca. There's no charismatic leader of Asatru, which is Norse religion.
Sure. But again, we're talking about cults, right? But I mean, like, does Wicca, does it meet the other two standards? I don't think it does.
Here's the thing. They can. Here's the thing. I don't think it's necessary to have a single leader, because often what happens is that leader dies.
Right.
And then they have to carry on. And so without that charismatic leader,
but the charismatic leader then just basically becomes a god figure, right? And so while the charismatic leader isn't physically there anymore, the memory of the charismatic leader and what the charismatic leader would have wanted now become the central focus, right? So just because he isn't actually talking to them doesn't mean he's not still talking to them. And so I think a perfect example of that is Scientology, right? It is absolutely, that organization revolves around its founder. And he's long gone, been gone since the 90s. And it's still about him. everything is about him. And so, um, you know, I still think, I'm not going to back down on that one. We'll agree to disagree on that one, I suppose.
I think here's the thing.
But I think a big part of it is a leader, because the leader also, and maybe we'll talk about this more in a minute, but the leader also is super important, because the leader is never elected. That leader is the organization. They develop, they grow that organization. They are responsible for it, right? And so it's so radically different than what Masonry is, which is almost radically democratic, right? We elect a new leader every year. We move on from people so quickly. We churn through our leadership. And so we don't have one person that we looked to and said,
well, hang on to that.
He made Masonry.
Hang on to that.
Yeah, we will. Okay. Right.
Because I think here's where I want to disagree. I like the language that they use when they talk about charismatic relationships, because that charismatic relationship could be a leader.
Sure.
Right. It could be a class of people. Right. It could be like so. Sure. So for example, you could look at something like the mafia, right? You could say that it's right. I mean, the one thing that they don't have is they're not an ideological organization, right? They fail that. I was going to say
they're literally the opposite of ideological.
But they are built on charismatic relationships, but they don't necessarily have one leader, right? There's always a boss, right? You remember the Gambino family or the whatever, right? So there's, or you could look at something like the Navy SEALs, right? Again, not ideologically driven, but charismatic relationships, absolutely.
Demanding high levels of commitment, they're ideologically driven. I would definitely say that the SEALs are ideologically driven. Well, I would say literally any military member is ideologically driven. It's what they do. And in fact, they kill for said ideology. They would die for said ideology. A pretty high level of commitment to that ideology.
Yeah, maybe. But I think if you, I think here's I don't want to go into that, but I mean,
sure.
I think put it this way, it's not an ideological organization. It's a military organization. Like it has a different purpose.
Yeah, we could argue that point. I think that's right. All right.
So let's
point.
Let's just leave that one. Right.
Yeah, that's right, counselor.
But here's the thing, like that allows for something like, I think the charismatic relationship is important because it's by force of personality. And I think that's what you're getting at with the leader.
No, that's precisely it, Eric.
It's not the merits. Mm-hmm. It's not necessarily the merits of the ideology. Nope. It's the force of the relationships.
Right. And it wasn't agreed on, by the membership in a non-biased way, right? Like generally the founder finds something, like he's the one who starts the whole movement. Now later the membership buys into it and all in lockstep agree that guy was right and everything he says is right and that's it. But by and large, they didn't come together with the idea first and then come up on a leader. That just doesn't happen. Not in a cult.
Yeah. So I think, again, like, because I'm not a scholar of new religions, and we probably should have had a scholar of new religions on the show to really talk about it.
What's the fun in having knowledge?
But
what's the fun in that? When we could just bumble through this ourselves.
But I bet I'm sure I could find examples of ideological organizations held together by charismatic relationships, demanding high levels of commitment that do not have a single charismatic leader.
Sure. All right.
Zen Buddhism comes far between. But okay,
not a cult.
What's that?
Not a cult. No, this is no. I think that I want to add a couple that I found that I think that characterize a cult. I think formulaic solutions right? Which is probably part of ideology, maybe in the way that they define things. But I think formulaic solutions are a hallmark of cults, because cults are there to give answers. They're not there to leave anything open-ended. They're not there to leave you guessing or to you find the solution, for you to find your own solution. They're there to provide solution. They're there to give answers.
Right.
And so
that's one of the things I
hallmark.
think is insidious about it, right? Is that, like,
Correct. Absolutely.
If you look at Nexium, right?
Yeah.
Or some of these other groups that are like that, they claim that they're giving you the tools so that you can decide for yourself, right? But the whole time they're deciding.
There's an agenda.
You.
Absolutely. They're telling you exactly where to go.
Now, the question is, do we have that in Masonry?
Wait, all right. Yeah.
I mean,
I got one more. One more.
Okay.
Actually, two more. I got two more. Inflexible values. But that probably goes along with maybe ideology, but maybe the last part was what? The high level of commitment? Is that what it's called?
Yes.
What was the last point?
Demanding high levels of commitment.
High levels of commitment. Maybe inflexible values would be in that, right? Because, a high level of commitment means you're inflexible. You have to be all in. Okay. But maybe that just clarifies that point.
Yeah.
I think also my last point is I think important to all of this. There is no exit plan from the organization. They give you nothing. You cannot easily walk out the door. You cannot easily say, I've moved on to something else. It just doesn't happen.
That's true.
Okay.
So there's a very good book on the subject, which I want to recommend. And I will again put the link to the book in the show notes. It's called The Churching of America. And it's sort of about new religious movements and how they got started in the United States. And it does a lot of things simultaneously, which makes it a really great book. One of the things it does is it busts a lot of myths and misconceptions that we have about America in colonial times, like that America was founded as a Christian nation, right? That is completely untrue if you look at the data, right? And so one of the things that they talk about is how, here I have it in my notes, they what is it? Only no more than 10 to 20% of Americans in 1776 belonged to a church.
Wow.
10%. Wow. Right?
Puritans are just crying right now.
And what they did, the way that they figured this out, right, was they looked at the actual membership rolls of the different churches. Because you could, there weren't that many of them, right? You could count them, and they all had membership rolls, and the most they were ever able to count was 17% of the general pop. Right?
Wow, that's crazy.
And almost all of that was centered around New England, right? So if you think about the Puritans, right? So the Puritans come to the New World, they settle, they have a really nice turkey dinner, right? And then they kill
their neighbors and everything's fine.
And then they establish a colony in Massachusetts, and there was, for the whole time that Massachusetts was a colony, there was a state religion, which became known as Congregationalism, right?
Yeah.
And even though they were independent congregations, right, that was the official, there was sort of a congregation, I guess. And tax dollars were collected in Massachusetts for the purpose of supporting that church. That was part of it. Right. But over time, that number started to drop. So it was really, really high in the 1600s when the Pilgrims got there. But by 1750, 1760, it really drops down to 10%. And then the other thing that is really interesting is that you don't see a religious uptick until the United States is founded and you have separation of church and state. And so it gets to be there's like this little period, like right after the Constitution, like the ink dries, and starting at around, 1809 and going up through 1850, you start to see this gradual rise in church
religiosity.
Religiosity. And so, up to the point where I think by 1850, it's like something in the neighborhood of 34%.
Wow. All right. But still, that still feels low to me.
Well,
right? Does it feel low to you?
Well, no, because it's only like,
feels low.
40 years, right?
Yeah, it still feels
to get
low.
like just about half.
No, but I'm saying, well, sure. But what I'm saying is that it still feels low, right? I mean, it feels like everybody back then was a Christian of some sort. And they were
they may have been really baptized as a Christian, right?
But I know, fine, but I'm just saying, like,
were they actually practicing, I go to church
18,
every Sunday
18, sure. 1850, 1860. I mean, the life expectancy is what, 50 at best? I'm being generous. I'm being very generous there. I know by, colonial times, 1780s, life expectancy is like 37. So, I mean, like, you get a paper cut, and if that bad boy gets infected, bye, good knowing you, if you don't cut your finger off fast enough. So anyhow, yeah.
Yeah. So here's what's so this book, the reason this book is so interesting and why I recommend it is that most of the time when you read a history of religion, they look at it through an ideological lens, right? So, you look at the early Christians and they were influenced by the Jews, the Romans, and then you had the, early medieval Christians, and they're all fighting over how many angels are on the head of a pin. And then we get to the Reformation, and it's all about religion as a ideological progression, right?
Okay.
And what these guys did is they look at religion like a marketing problem. They look at it they're looking at like the economics of religion. They're treating religion as if it were a product. And so one of the things they figured out was that the reason that there was such an upswing in religiosity after the founding of the United States was that once you had separation of church and state, the barrier to entry was very, very low for religions, right? No longer were there state-supported religions. No longer was there, right? So in other words, like you could, when you had a state-supported religion, you could have another religion as long as it was on the list, right? If you wanted to have a religion that, worship trees and stuff like that, that kind of stuff still wasn't tolerated. But if you were Jewish or you were, Seventh-day Adventist or, whatever those denominations were, right? As long as you were like nominally Christian, no one's going to really say anything about it. Right. And so, but then when there's a strict separation of church and state, anybody could do anything. Right. And so you start to have these groups that break off. And so they kind of look at sort of the difference between, their word for cult is sect, a sect and a church. Okay. Right.
Sure. Okay.
And so a sect to them, is, a sect. What separates a sect from a church is the degree of tension between the religious organization and society. Right. And so
the higher the tension,
they say, start out as sects.
Right.
And they like they're charismatic, right? They have a definite ideology, and they demand high levels of commitment. And if you look at the history of like early Christianity was a cult.
Sure.
Right.
100%. Right. Yeah. Also charismatic leader.
Yeah.
Sorry. Didn't mean to point that one out. That probably hurt.
Yeah. So over time though, what happens is that let's see here. If they're successful in attracting a following, they will over time almost invariably be gradually transformed into churches, right? So in other words, they always shift their emphasis toward this world and away from the next world, right? And when that happens, they have to kind of open up to allow
Sure.
more people in, right? And
Okay.
So they have to in order to attract more people, they have to go from high levels of tension to lower and lower and lower levels of tension, right? So like for example, in the Mormon church, right? It used to be that like you had to have a temple endowment, and you had to wear the special underwear, and you had to, travel across the country to Utah. I mean, there was like all this stuff you
couldn't be black.
Couldn't be black, right? Right.
Couldn't be a woman.
Right. But actually you could be a woman. But
that came later.
But
you could definitely be one of multiple wives.
Well, but today you can be a part of the Mormon church and never set foot in a temple. Right.
There you go.
And
you can be a full member.
Yeah. Over time,
absolutely.
It's lessened, right? And so when you look at the when you look at sort of the development of religion, that is
and honestly, the Church of Latter-day Saints is literally textbook in all of this stuff and how it develops.
Yeah.
Because it follows every step perfectly, where it starts as this very small, very I hate to say elite, but that's exactly what they're doing, right? They are purposely keeping this a small, select group. And that small, select group is very, quote unquote, devout or completely bought in to their idea, which, again, charismatic leader, Joseph Smith. And sorry, I hate to pound on your point like that, but, whatever. As they develop, as that ideology becomes more popular, right? As they bring in more people that say, "Boy, that is really great. I hear what you're saying, and I'm buying it. I like it. It's very American." As that happens, as that faith starts to spread and grow, you notice that they start losing more controversial aspects of it, right? The whole, you don't have to be white. That's okay. To the multiple wives thing, that's, we're not going to do that.
Yeah,
anymore.
we don't do multiple wives. We don't
do any of that stuff. There's a whole list of things that were central. I mean, they showed how hardcore the believers used to be in the first settlements that literally now today are just completely at the wayside to the mainstream church. And so it's really interesting, and it's really interesting to follow that development of that church.
And the other thing that's really interesting, I mean, one of the things that I think is really fascinating about the LDS church is that because it's a church that was founded in relatively modern times, you can really kind of put it under a microscope and take a look at it. So that kind of goes to the next law of the sect church process that they talk about in the book, which is that at a certain point, a church gets big enough that it can't meet everybody's needs in exactly the same way. So you get these groups of disaffected people within those churches, and they spin out their own sects. Right. So the Mormons, there's these different church. I don't know. Can't remember what they're called, but there's like a sect of like the New Reformed, LDS or whatever.
And there's and there are various groups of them, and they tend to be fundamentalist.
Yeah, they're harder core, and they have more tension,
high society,
high societal tension, right? And so that to me, I thought was a really, really interesting, discussion, because I think we have a little bit of that in Freemasonry.
I'll buy that. I totally buy that. See, again, this is why I think, it's attractive for people to call us a cult, is because there are little pieces of that personality in us, and I see it. It's familiar, at least. Okay, and I think you're right. I think that societal tension is definitely one of them.
Yeah. So let's do this exercise. So the ISCA, our friends with the word cultic in their name, or ICSA. The International Cultic Studies Association has created a checklist so that you can see whether you're a cult or not. So shall we take it on behalf of Freemasonry?
Let's do it.
Okay.
Roll that beautiful bean footage.
All right. Number 1, the group displays excessive, zealous, and unquestioning commitment to its leader, whether he is alive or dead, regards his belief system, ideology, and practices as truth as law.
I'm going to have to say no on that one.
I'm going to have to say no as well. I'll say
now. This is a yes no question.
You had me at the first part of it, but then you lost me
in
the second part.
Yeah, I agree. Yep, I agree with that 100%. I was going to say it's a shame I can't put this on a feeling thermometer, because it would not be completely agree.
Right.
But it would be. Okay. I somewhat agree. Agree. Okay.
So no. All right. So questioning, doubt, and dissent are discouraged or even punished. I got to be honest and say yes.
It could be. I don't know.
You start talking about letting women into Freemasonry or not having a VSL on the altar, and
it's fair.
Does not go well for you, right?
Nah, it really doesn't. It's a good point. All right, we'll take a yes on that question.
All right.
I feel a little dirty about that, but yeah. Again, feeling thermometer would have been really helpful here.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Mind-altering practices such as meditation, chanting, speaking in tongues, denunciation sessions, and debilitating work routines are used in excess and serve to suppress doubts about the group and its leaders.
Absolutely. If you've ever been to a pancake breakfast or had to work a pancake breakfast, this is 100% true. That's debilitating service right there.
I've been to a lot of. I've been to a lot.
All right, fine. We'll say no.
Never once has my mind been altered by a pancake.
My soul has. So fine, whatever. Go ahead.
All right, I'm gonna give that one a hard no.
That's a hard no. Fine.
Okay.
Again, a feeling thermometer.
The leadership dictates, sometimes in great detail, how members should think, act, and feel. For example, members must get permission to date, change jobs, marry, or leaders prescribe what types of clothing to wear, where to live, whether or not to have children, how to discipline children, and so forth.
I'm gonna say, again, feeling thermometer. I'm gonna say this for all of them, but a feeling thermometer would have been really helpful here, because some would agree. And it's not like the examples they give are extreme, I think, but the way that they ask that question, right? So ask the first part again.
The leadership dictates, sometimes in great detail, how members should think, act, and feel.
Yeah, that's a yes, right? I mean,
no,
we all have a code. We have a code. Grandmaster tells you.
But it doesn't tell you how to think. It doesn't tell you how to think.
I've been told, Grandmaster has said this. Just you be happy. You might disagree, but you know what? It's your duty.
But you're allowed. But here's the thing: you might disagree,
lockstep. But lockstep. That's behave. Because here's the thing, right? Is that dissent is not tolerated. Not. It just isn't. And that's a reality. I don't think that's a. For me, that's a yes. I don't think it is to the extreme that they talk about in their examples, but I'm going to go for a yes. I know that
if you're listening to this, help me out here in the comments.
I don't think so. I
got to disagree, and I'll tell you why. When I think about stuff like, and we've reported on this in the past, like the shenanigans in Tennessee and, stuff like, like there was a lot of dissent in that. And there was a lot, there were calls.
And those people were punished.
Yeah, but
they were kicked out. There was a witch hunt.
Yeah, I understand that.
They were drummed out of the state.
Here's the thing. It didn't go very well for them. They got de-recognized by several other Grand Lodges.
Yeah,
I think,
but it wasn't really that bad.
Here's the thing. I think Masonry.
Really, it's like that. No. It was like that Brad Pitt line at the end of Inglourious Bastards. I might get chewed out, but I've been chewed out before.
Yeah, no,
and that's exactly what happened to them. Nothing happened.
We're gonna come back to this one.
Fine. Right. You're gonna lose that one.
No, I'm not.
Keep going. Keep going, loser boy.
The group is elitist, claiming a special exalted status for itself, its leaders, and its members. And they give an example. Familiar. For example, the leaders consider the Messiah a special being or an avatar, or the group and or the leader is on a special mission to save humanity. I'm going to go with an absolute yes. even though we don't consider our
yes.
leaders messiahs, but
Right.
we are elitist. We do
Yes.
claim a special exalted status for ourselves.
Correct.
And our members. We are
Absolutely.
brought to light.
Yeah. Feeling thermometer would have been helpful here. That would have been a mostly agree. You know, I mean, you're right. I mean, we're missing one tiny element of that. I call it a yes. I call it a 90% yes.
I'll tell you what. Let's do it on a 5-point scale.
Okay,
sorry,
let's give that a 4
point scale. 4-point scale.
4 point. Oh, 5.
Yeah,
5 is neutral.
because five lets you go in the middle, and that's
yeah, you're right, and that's right.
Chicken crap.
I agree. People in the middle suck. Go ahead. Yeah. All right, 4.
All right, so you're going to give it a what?
I'll give it 3.
I'm going to give it a 3.
Yeah.
All right.
And I want you to. 4. Well, yeah. Let's go back and give us some numbers.
All right. So the group displays excessively zealous and unquestioning commitment to its leader. Regards to belief system, ideology, and practices as the truth as law.
Give me 2. I'll take a 2 on that.
Okay, I'm going to go with a 1.
That's fine.
2, 1. Okay.
Definitely a 2.
Questioning, doubt, and dissent are discouraged or even punished.
Give me a 3.
Huh?
I'll take a 3.
All right, I'm going to go with a 3 as well. Okay. Mind-altering practices such as meditation, chanting, speaking in tongues, denunciation sessions, and debilitating work routines are used in excess and serve to suppress doubts about the group and its leaders.
I'll give it 2 for reasons I may explain.
Okay, I'm giving it a 1. All right. The group is so we said the group is elitist, right?
Yeah. I'm going to move my 2 to a 1.5. Sorry.
So you don't think it's elitist?
No. I'm moving from the last question. The mind altering craziness.
Okay. Sorry.
I'll only say this about that, and then I'm going to drop it because I don't want to get too far into it. But third degree, I believe, is mind altering. But that's a different conversation.
Yeah, but it doesn't serve to suppress doubts.
Sure, it does. Well, I can't get into it. I can't get into it.
All right.
But it does.
No.
It does. Not on what you think. Not the doubts as to what you think, but I'll.
All right. The leadership dictates sometimes in great
later.
detail how members should think, act, and feel. You said 3. I said 4.
Yeah.
The group is
elitist. Wait, no, I thought I was more committed than you.
Oh, sorry. You know what? I did that for the other one.
Okay.
So the leadership dictates sometimes in great detail how members should think, act, and feel.
I said
for
4,
example,
you said 3.
Members must get permission to date, change jobs, marry. Leaders prescribe what types of clothing to wear, where to live, whether or not to have children,
3.
how to discipline children, and so forth.
3. I'll take a 3.
We're going to give it a 3.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's mostly, we're elitist. We use peer pressure against each other. 100%.
Okay. The group is elitist. So we did that one already. The group has a polarized us versus them mentality, which may cause conflict with the wider society.
Give me a 3.
Now here's where I'm going to, so
it's tricky.
I think there are groups.
That one's tricky.
I think there are groups within Masonry that are like that.
But general Freemasonry isn't. I'll buy that. I'll buy that.
I think us versus the rest of society, I give it a hard no. But I think within Freemasonry, like I claim myself as part of this group, right? Like there's the there's the us type of people, and then there's the one-day class type people, right?
Yeah. All right. Fine. I mean, I don't know, Eric.
I'm giving it a 1.
Yeah. I kind of have to too. It's a 1. You're right. I mean, because larger Freemasonry, maybe, but yeah. Okay. Move on.
All right. So the leader is not accountable to any authorities, unlike, for example, teachers, military commanders, or ministers, priests, monks, and rabbis of mainstream religious denominations. I'd say on paper that's true, but in reality, no.
Correct. Let's call it a solid 3.
3?
As a yes.
I'd say no.
No, it's a solid 3. I mean, what grandmaster doesn't get away with whatever they want?
I'd say it's yes, but I think in reality, no.
Dude, I can give you 3 examples off the top of my head of grandmasters getting away with awful shenanigans. Come on. And beyond that.
Yeah, but we're not talking about a Grand Lodge. We're talking about Masonry as a whole.
Yeah. And I'm talking about, what I was going to say is, and beyond just that, I can give you examples of guys who've stolen significant amounts of money from their lodge, only to have their lodge go, pay us back. I don't have any money. Fine. Then you're out of the organization. Bad on you. And they don't press charges. I mean, I can give you multiple examples of that happening that I know of, and that's across the country. So like, we're not real great. I mean, I can't give it a firm yes, but I can't give it a no.
All right. So you're going to,
you know what I'm saying? I'm going to give it 3.
You're going to give it 3.
Yeah. We just don't really hold people accountable. We don't hold people accountable.
It's all right.
I mean, when's the last time you've heard someone held accountable for something? You know, right. I mean, just, it doesn't really happen.
The group teaches or implies that it is supposedly exalted ends justify whatever means it deems necessary. This may result in members participating in behaviors or activities they would have considered reprehensible or unethical before they joined the group. I'm giving that a hard one.
Solid one. Solid one. That could be a
That's
a
part
negative.
Of our ritual.
Right. That could be a negative.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, you can put a -4 on that. That's so far no that it's in the ground.
Yeah, that's right. The leadership induces feelings of shame or guilt in order to influence or control members. Often this is done through peer pressure and subtle forms of persuasion. I think there are people who have tried, but it never works, and it's not part of Masonry.
Yeah, I give it a 2 because, I mean, they try, but I think you're right. I give it a 2.
Subservience to the leader or group requires members to cut ties with family and friends and to radically alter the personal goals and activities they had before they joined the group.
No, that's a -500.
My wife might beg to differ, but I'm going to have to give it a hard 1.
Right. Yeah, it's solid
1. The group is preoccupied with bringing in new members. I got to give that one a 4.
Sure. Can you give it a 5 just for me?
No.
Yeah, right. That's a 4.
Okay.
Yeah,
the group is preoccupied with making money. Preoccupied, I'm going to give that a 1. I don't think they were preoccupied with making money.
I'm not going to give it a 1. You know that you can't give that a 1. A 1 means that just doesn't happen. I'll give it a 2. Because I think you're right in general, but we really like it.
Okay. All right. Members are expected to devote inordinate amounts of time to the group and group related activities.
That'd be a 4.
I'm going to give that a 4. We're going to go to Masonic hell, Jason.
I know.
Members are encouraged or required to live and or socialize only with other group members.
See question before this.
I'm gonna go with
no. I'll give it a 2. Yeah, and I'd even say 1.5.
Encouraged.
It's so small. Yeah, it's so small. I think 1.5. Yeah.
The most loyal members, the true believers, feel that there can be no life outside the context of the group. They believe there is no other way to be and often fear reprisals to themselves or others if they leave or even consider leaving the family. Much as David Icke would beg to differ.
Right. Yeah.
I gotta go with a 1. Hard 1 there.
It's a 1. That's a hard 1. Yeah.
All right.
I mean, they had me. I mean, like some of the hardcore members believe that there is no life outside the organization. Yes, but that's literally the only piece of that. And you literally could say that for your D.
All right, I'm gonna tabulate all this. Stall for time.
Okay. All right. So I think that what did we have? How many questions altogether?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So 15.
So 15 is our bottom score. That'd be no, definitely not a cult. And 60 would be, oh my God, call the deprogrammer. I'm in need of emergency assistance to get out of this cult. So I'd say that anything from that 15 to 60 score, I think that anything in the 50s, I think if you score, I think you got to score in the 50s to get, yeah, you're a cult. I think anything below 50, you know, you're not a cult too. We display some troubling tendencies. So where are we at?
Hang on.
On the 15 to 60 point scale of cultism. I'm hoping for kind of a high score. I don't know why I am. Maybe I'm used to, I'm conditioned to want a high score. And I have some sort of OCD. I think that's probably what it is. I want the high score. And I want to shove it in the face of religions and say, ha, screw you, religion. Look what I have. But, again, it's probably personality driven.
Okay. So it turns out that you and I tabulated the scores separately.
Right.
And
good. Uh-huh.
And then I took the average. Well, guess what? We both came in at 28.
See, look at that. How screwy is that?
Right.
So
we were different. We were different on different aspects of it.
But again, so I think this is really interesting, Eric, right?
And the average score, when you average it all together, 1.8. Yeah. So that I think that firmly puts us into the no.
Firmly non-cult. Yeah. Firmly non-cult. I agree with that.
There you have it. Science. Everybody. Science.
Look at that. We quantified it. Absolutely right. We used numbers
to prove it.
That's right. We use numbers to map our feelings. Screw all of you. I feel great. I feel vindicated, Eric. I feel like my life choices are finally put into numbers, and that's good.
Yeah.
And I'm choosing to look at that as a golf score.
So, but here's the thing. What's interesting about this, though, is that we definitely identified some of the aspects that are consistent with a cult, and I think one of them is that we do, and in fact, the more active you are, like I would even go so far as to say, is if you are a listener of this show, right, you probably are desiring more tension with society than you're probably getting in Freemasonry now. And that's why we're we read about it. That's why we're so concerned about it. Right.
Yeah. I'll buy that. I'll totally buy that.
But there's a balance, right? Too much tension and you turn people off, not enough tension, and you can't attract the zealots that are going to help you grow. Right. Which is why this notion, it's funny, but like this explains, many of us, I would say those of us of like mind have always felt that this idea of making Masonry easier was not the answer, making it more convenient, making, like, let's get all your degrees in an hour. Here's a video,
Right. But I think that's really funny because like the zealots of Masonry are completely opposed to the formulaic solution of, hey, there's one answer. It fits everyone. And all you have to do, is join this lodge for $5,000. They don't like that. That's I think that really, maybe the more you get into Masonry, the more you believe and the more you come to understand that this is a really intensely personal thing that you're meant to share with your brothers, but they don't pull you down their path. You're always on your own path. Does that make sense?
I think I do, but I think that there are personalities. I think that there are people in Masonry who would like it to be more, tension, and they, like, put it this way, there's all kinds of examples in history where someone tried to turn Masonry into a cult. Right. So a great example, I think, is, and I'm sure there are people who will argue with me about it, but the OTO, right? Aleister Crowley's.
There you go. Absolutely. And I agree with you there.
And I think that there's a lot of, like, Chicago is one of those cities that has a tremendous number of clandestine lodges because, somebody would get upset with the Prince Hall Grand Lodge and be like, well, I'm starting my own. And they, go down the street and open up a storefront and, they're the lodge of St. John the Jupiter Incorporated.
Yeah. We've got a bunch out here too,
Yeah.
And we've got a bunch out here. There are a bunch in the South. There's a ton in the South. Mm-hmm. A lot of, it's really interesting. I think like Cernoism, is that a cult? Right. Could be. And he was given the hard sell on that ritual, baby. And he got stomped out in New York, but could be.
Yeah. And so I think
Memphis Mizraim.
Yeah. I mean, I would, you could make that argument, right?
Sure.
But I think that there were certainly attempts to, turn it into a religious thing. I think, you might even, I've heard the argument. I'm not familiar enough with Mormon theology to be an expert on it, but I've heard someone say that, the early Mormon church was an attempt to take the raw material of Freemasonry and make it into, a more religious practice.
I've heard that too.
But yeah, but so there's a couple things, so like, I think there are those of us who want tension in the world. I think of the like there's sort of a dichotomy between the, someone who is like, I'll call them like a hardcore Shriner, right? Who believes that the future of Masonry is in fellowship and having a good time and having special interest groups and things like that people want to do, and charitable work. And then, on the other side of the fence, you've got these esotericists who believe that, Masonry should be this really laborious process and super expensive and white tie and electric
it's funny, lights should be forbidden.
And it also, this theory of sect versus church kind of explains why, in other countries where Masonry is either suppressed or it needs to be kept on the download, there is that high degree of tension with society. And you do have Masonry that, it is black tie and it is very expensive. And you do have a higher degree of experience and things like that because of that, tension with society. Right. Sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. Makes sense.
So I think that this is kind of an interesting, thing. Like we're not, there's certain, there's certain forces, I think, and tendencies that we have where, because of our hunger for more tension with society, because of our hunger for more, commitment and more of a special feeling, feeling like we're different and we're unique and we have something unique to offer and things like that. That I see that desire and that yearning manifest in different ways. So for example, like, when people say, we just need to, we need fewer people in Masonry. We need to make it harder to get in. Like we need to guard the West Gate better. Right. And that's a good thing. But like, if you're keeping out, like, in other words, that only works when you have people banging down your door trying to get in. Right. Like you can only have a door policy at a nightclub when you got a line of people waiting to get in. If there's no line of people, there's no point in having a velvet rope outside. It's
exactly right.
Right.
Right. Right. Absolutely.
Right? And so like, and then there's things like, traditional observance. Well, I know traditional observance lodges that are terrible.
Sure.
They're
100%.
like needlessly expensive. And I know some other like regular old lodges that are fantastic.
Sure.
Absolutely. Because they're doing what their members are about. Right. Mm-hmm. So I think that we, this is one of those watch outs for us where we have a tendency to want these things, but we don't necessarily think it through. Like the solution to all of Freemasonry is not European concept.
That's exactly right.
That works when you have a high degree of tension.
Right. Well, here's the other thing, right? Is that I always find it's hilarious to me is that you go through all these Scottish Rite degrees, right? And whatever, and you do. I did a little bit of York Rite, but not a lot. And not a member anymore. But I went through these Scottish Rite degrees, and I've done other degrees, and I've always thought that the best lesson, the one lesson that really drives home to me, is the 32nd degree in the Scottish Rite, Southern jurisdiction, the master of the royal secret. And the reason it drives home to me is that my old boss, the Grand Commander, used to ask people, young guys who just gone through the degrees, so what was that 32nd degree about? Well, you know, they had it was chivalric. There were things. It was a camp, you know, and they would tell him all about the degree, and he'd go, "Great, all right, what's the name of it again?" Master of the Royal Secret. And he'd go, "Awesome. What's the Royal Secret?" And the best part is that the Royal Secret is the easiest, dumbest thing, and it's so profound, and it's balanced. The Royal Secret is balance. It's never being too far on one side of anything, and it's so instructive.
Is it who the father of the king really was?
Right. It's so ridiculous. It is the dumbest concept that is the deepest thing in the whole world. When you really think about what does that mean to me in my life, if you try to act in accordance with it and try and not, you know, go too far to the one side of anything, you find yourself going, "Oh, I get it. That really does make me happy. That makes people around me happy because I'm not an ass, you know? I'm not that overcommitted zealot, right? Who's forcing people into a situation they don't want to be in, because I'm balanced. I know when to quit on that stuff. It's just, to me, it's both one of the most simplistic and most profound things in Masonry. And that alone gets it out of being a cult. There ain't no balance in cults. That's for sure.
Yeah. I mean, other behaviors that I've seen that kind of push us in that direction, you know, getting a tattoo.
Yeah, sure. Right? Okay. Yeah. That's a high level of commitment, baby.
That is a high level of commitment. Right.
I know a guy, by the way, who got a huge tattoo on his back, and he doesn't go to lodge anymore. I wonder how that feels. It's gotta be weird.
I'm sure.
Right.
I'm sure he doesn't even think about it. Cause like, when do you see
it's on
it?
His back. It's a good point.
Right.
It's a good point. Right. It's weird though. Whole back. Seriously, the whole back doesn't go to lodge.
And so the other thing too is there are other aspects of it that I was kind of like looking at that show us that we're not a cult. And one of them is the idea of creativity.
Yeah.
Right. Masonry celebrates and incents and rewards creativity in the form of historical research and writing. We do. We like it. We seek it out.
Right. Maybe.
You know, we seek out speculative, you know, put it this way, even kind of dumb stuff like, you know, the Hiram key and, you know, stuff like we love that stuff. We eat that stuff up, right?
We do eat that stuff up. We're dumb.
You know, and in a cult, like, unless that's coming from the top, you know, you're not allowed.
It's fair. It's fair. Love Da Vinci Code. Kill me. Whatever. Yeah. Okay. Fine. I give up.
Okay.
Which, by the way, if there's ever a book to read that says I give up, Da Vinci Code.
You think so?
It's just, I've given up on the world. Anyhow, yeah, go ahead. Sorry. Just me making fun of Dan Brown. Met him a couple times.
Yeah. All right. Well, okay. So
his wife impressed me. She was smart.
His wife?
Yeah. And now ex-wife. She was really smart. She was really interesting. She was a little odd. I liked that, you know. And she was the one who wanted to talk about stuff, and like you know, let's, you know, what about that Memphis Misery kind of stuff? Like, oh, you know,
you know about Memphis.
So yeah, right. Let's talk. And she was a lot of fun and like funny, little dark. He was very businesslike. It was very much, this is a job, and he's more of a. He's not a.
Do you think he was more being deferential and polite?
No, he's not like a, when I say like, this is my job, he's not the, hey, I got to wear my suit and tie and be, you know, this is my job. He's more of a, hey man, wear khakis to work. That's my job. He was a khaki wearer to work. She was a thinker. She was a weirdo. I liked her. I mean, she was a little odd. She really was.
Maybe she really wrote the books.
I've heard that. honestly, I've heard that that a lot of the ideas came from her.
Oh, we're gonna get in so much trouble, Jason.
Right. Well, I know, but she was interesting. She was a lot of fun. Anyhow.
Cool. All right. So question answered. No, we are not a cult. You can enjoy.
Not a cult.
You can enjoy
Solidly
the vow.
Right. You can. I have, because it's gotten exponent. Episode 5 just watched before we got on the air. We are into wow territory on how crazy the story is getting. And I know that there's more to slide. So.
And here's the thing. I'll just say this, that I think that there's some unrecognized brilliance in our founders.
Yeah.
In that they kind of created a structure and a way of operating that like, for example, the idea of landmarks, right?
Yeah.
Is a brilliant way to make sure that nobody can kind of take this off into a crazy direction without an immune system kicking in and kind of closing ranks around it. Right.
Right. And saying, no, that's too far. But these are 3 or 4 things that these got to be here.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that we elect our leaders, that's huge.
It was really funny when we first had this conversation. You were the first to say, we elect our leaders, Jason. I was like, oh yeah, right. I forgot about that. Yeah, we do choose these people. We don't choose well sometimes, but I mean, we do choose them. And that makes a huge difference. I mean, like who got chosen for the cult, right?
Yeah, right.
Like I said in the beginning of the show, they don't have an idea, a fully formed idea in a group and then go, all right, it's a fully formed idea. Who's going to be our charismatic leader? Bob, you up for the task? I'll vote for you. Right? That doesn't happen. Yeah. It's very much one-sided. And I think that we have such radical democracy that we change every year.
And can you imagine, like, so it's funny. So I have a colleague at work who, he's British, and he grew up going to, there's a school called Christ Hospital that is run by the Masons. It's like a charitable school. It's like a private school. It's charitable.
Sure.
And he went there and he said, oh yeah, I have really fond memories, and there were a lot of sort of Masonic ideas that were taught as part of the curriculum, and I remember those. And my dad or my grandfather was a Mason, and he showed me a book that he had, and the book was a history of, I think it's the St. John's Lodge of Glasgow.
Cool. Yeah.
Number 2,
old one. Yeah.
BIS. Yeah. And I'm like, what does that mean? Right. And so I had to go research it. And what I found out was that, like when the Grand Lodge was formed in Scotland, right?
Before institutional sanitation?
Well, when the Grand Lodge was formed in Scotland, right, there were already a bunch of lodges, and the Kilwinning, Mother Kilwinning Lodge has already chartered like 15, 20 lodges herself. Right. Sure. So I think the way that they did it, and I'm sure someone will disagree with me. I hope they do. But is that like the order in which you entered the room was the order in which your lodge was given. So, St. John, Glasgow Lodge St. John walks in, and they're like, you're number whatever. And they're like, no, we're number 3. No. So, so-and-so is number 3. They're like, yeah, okay, we're still number 3. Right. And so they were given the number 3 bis, which in French, bis is a French legal term meaning the second version. So there's, in Scotland, there was like lodge number 3 and lodge number 3 bis, right?
The second version of lodge number 3.
Yeah. And then they recycle numbers. So there's like, like there's lodge number 5, and then there's superscript 3, which means this is the third number 5 we've had because they recycle the numbers. There's no way we can be a cult.
No,
like the Scots would just dismantle that in
that's
like
totally
5
true,
minutes,
by the way.
Right?
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
Some guy would stand up and say, "I'm your charismatic leader," and
Also, yeah, you're 100% right. And the thing is that the truth of the matter is that our origins are probably Scottish in nature. you know, in all likelihood. And if there's one thing the Scots hate, it's a charismatic leader.
It's someone telling them what to do. Yeah. No, absolutely.
Completely. Right. I mean, yeah, they love freedom so much they'd knife Ayn Rand.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good for them.
All right. Well, okay. So we've answered the question. Masonry, not a cult. So culture craft, definitely craft.
Right. Definitely not a cult. I feel good about this.
Yeah.
I like that.
Our work here is done.
Work here is done.
Well,
problem solved. Next up.
This is the part of the show where we thank our executive producers. Without your support, this show doesn't happen. Bandwidth is expensive, and so is
right.
So is
bringing
you all this.
But we couldn't be this smug.
We could not
on a weekly basis.
Or bi-weekly, yeah. So so next week we're going to be on YouTube exclusively. We will make an announcement in the Facebook, on the Facebook page, and we'll also make an announcement. What we might do is experiment with doing a quick live announcement sometime midweek, just to let people know.
That'd be fun. Yeah, okay, that'd be fun. Just get on the air and tell people.
Just yeah,
that'd be fun. Okay.
Let's talk about that after the show's over.
Sure. Okay.
And so again, if you'd like to become an executive producer and help the show out, go to our Patreon page. It's patreon.com/X-Oriente. Again, thank you so much. And until next week, you have anything else?
No, all done. Thank you,
cool.
Everyone.
Thank you. Thank you to the folks who showed up. And again, like, you know, if you go over to the YouTube channel, we will you'll be able to interact just as much over there as well, and we really appreciate your input because it makes the show better. So
thanks, guys.
Fiat Vox, everybody.
Good night.